invested in some startup. What the hell is it? Come on, lights, let's change. And things. So this is not working. I'm not sure how to describe Jeremy King to you. He's an ex-advertising guy from the UK who came to Australia to work for Australia's richest man, who's not Rupert Murdoch. He left that because he got a passion for fashion. He started, built and sold a couple of fashion and cosmetics chains. Then he started a bar, as you do. Then he started another bar, and now he's back investing in labels, but you've never heard of him. He has almost no public profile. There's an article in the Financial Review 9 years ago. There is a not very well liked LinkedIn page, and then there's this video. And the amount of effort it's taken to get this video off with kind of building trust and things has been considerable. I think of him as an entrepreneur, except that I also think of entrepreneurs as the people who are always out the front in front of the brand, being the face of the business, and he's not that. He's always hired other people to be the face of his business. But he's not a passive investor because he likes to get very involved in the business. He makes decisions in the business, and it's his entrepreneurial zeal that drives much of the business. What is he? Is he an angel? I pinned him down to that, which he seemed comfortable with. But I don't know if that's accurate either. An angel is someone who puts their money and expertise and time into a business. But then he's starting businesses. He's not just investing in them. So you can judge for yourself. Here's Jeremy King. Well, hi Jeremy, how are you?
Hi, good to see you. I bought a tea just in case.
Great. Look, you seem to have made your fortune in businesses that every investment book and self-help book says to avoid. So first fashion, then you got into cosmetics, now you own a bar, and you're dipping your toe into fashion again. What made you turn from a nice, secure media job to fashion?
I think the first thing, that the secure media job might have been an illusion. I worked for Kerry Packer, so that was an interesting time in the 90s. But no, I didn't read any self-help book. That was probably the issue too, is I never got around to reading any. Fashion came about, I was in New York and really came across people who were involved in fashion. Came back to Australia, started it fresh from nothing, with no experience, which was probably crazy. But
where do you start with that? Australia has a very kind of closed off fashion industry. There's a few people that really run the whole thing. So how do you
I started very small. I mean, I literally bought from a wholesaler in Sydney and resold it. We rented a small shop on Pitt Street Mall. There was a pop-up store, and I rented it for a minimal price per week, and it literally took off straight away without any exaggeration. Day one we opened, there was a queue down the street. It was a very rough and ready setup, but within that moment, I could start feeling it out. I could see the sales. We were doing young fashion. It was a low price point. There wasn't a lot of competition in Australia, so it was quite easy to get into.
So how did you get the message out that you were going to be there in Pitt Street?
Okay, so yeah, that is a good point. I came out of advertising, and I knew that you had to make a noise. Okay, this is pre-internet days, really. So there was no Instagram or Facebook where you could splash things. What we did is actually hired a DJ, and we put it on the street and ran it 24 hours. I mean, the shop was called Insane. And so I felt at the time the only way to get attention, and this is the middle of Pitt Street Mall, was to run a DJ 24 hours. What happened was the police came at midnight and shut us down, and the local newspaper, I think Sydney Morning Herald, ran a story saying this insane shop is open 24 hours. And I think after that, it just rolled. And of course, we had to live up to our insane name. So it was quite good fun.
And was Insane then the brand that you rolled out? Like, was that the one you kept expanding and built up the first business?
Yeah, it was an accidental name. I mean, we stood in front of this pop-up store with some fashion, and we didn't know what to call it. And Tasha, one of the younger girls that worked for me, who was the buyer, looked at me and said, "You're driving me insane." And we literally wrote Insane across in red paint on the front. And I guess the naivety of it and the simplicity of it just works so well with the consumers. I mean, were they going to get an insane experience, insane prices? and it just caught the imagination. And I think we ended up with a DJ running 24 hours for quite some time until the council actually sent us warnings. I think it took them about 6 months. But by that time, we'd established ourselves as this shop where you buy female fashion to go out clubbing. In those days, there was a lot of nightclubs around to go out. The competition was really, there was only 2 other groups in that category. As soon as I established it, as soon as I felt about 6 months in, I opened a second store in Pitt Street, just up the road at the other end of the street. And then the store after that was Burwood, Parramatta. And then we rolled out right up to the Gold Coast and all up the East Coast, 10 stores almost within 9 or 10 months. Yeah.
And then were you designing for yourselves at this point, or were you still just buying stuff from wholesalers?
We started buying from wholesalers in Surrey Hills. I think a lot of people did back then. There were 3 or 4 wholesalers that seemed to be really on top of it. And then we needed to go into manufacturing. I mean, we couldn't get enough product. Burwood store, Insane store on a Saturday, just on one day would sell 90 pairs of one style of jeans. We just couldn't get enough. And we were definitely tight on the margin. To get more margin, I needed to manufacture. So I jumped on a plane to China back in the late 90s, which was very early. And I literally did a joint venture with a factory there. 120 sewing machines, and we opened a factory, the Insane factory, I called it. And we started importing almost in the first year. Selective product, firstly jeans and denim, which were very fashionable then. And we really designed and focused on the denim. Then, of course, we went straight into the very tops. And then we went into swimwear. We were, apart from Seafolly, we were the only ones doing swimwear. I mean, we were bringing in over 100,000 pieces a shipment and selling them really at $19.95, which was incredible back then, the price point. So, yeah, and we moved into manufacturing almost immediately.
So how do you know what to manufacture? I mean, you're not Anna Wintour, and there's not much guidance for, I mean, even if you were, that's all high-end fashion, but you're youth fashion, and it's very fast-paced, it's very clicky, and it's not driven by old people like you. Like, where do you get the intelligence on what to be manufacturing? That,
I mean, pre-internet days was really a little harder. So you would watch the, Top of the Pops in the UK. You would watch certainly the American channels were huge. I mean, anything in Los Angeles, really, if Beyonce was wearing it and Charlie's Angels film came out, the first one back then, we would literally watch TV, and I would have a still camera. In those days, I would have a really good, the best quality digital camera, which had just come out. And we would do digital stills, take it back to the office in Alexandria. And then we would literally design off that. So we're doing, if someone was wearing a sequin top on Destiny's Child, we wanted to have it within 2 weeks in the stores. And coming in very, very far, when we had our own factory in China, we were air freighting everything. I did no sea freight for 4 years, which was really unheard of. I mean, we were air freighting everything in, cutting the margins a little tight and in the retail, and then going first to market. And it took off. It was crazy. The volume was incredible.
So did that make you Australia's first fast fashion shop?
I felt it did. I mean, at the time there was Supre, but they were really selling a lot of older ladies' clothes. Hound Dog were the only competition with us. Hound Dog were about 8 stores, and we were 17 stores up the East Coast. They were sort of head to head with a club wear. I mean, keep in mind, this was a club time where nightclubs, there was 35 nightclubs in Sydney back then. And people were going out. And so it was really this going out where they'd buy it on a Saturday, wear it on a Saturday night. Then next week they would buy again on a Saturday and wear it on Saturday night. Saturdays in the Insane stores, some of the stores had up to 20 staff and 120 square meters.
Wow.
I mean, that's how busy we were back then.
And so you built up Insane, and you ended up also manufacturing for brands like Target and other brands.
Yeah, we did. The factory was we had gaps in our production, so I wanted to fill the gaps. So I went out and spoke to Myers. Actually, I went to Billabong first, and different companies around that would fill in that production gap. So we would do jeans under their label, whatever label they preferred. We call them house labels or private labels. And we would manufacture from 400 to 40,000 jeans or tops. Wow. And that's how we filled in our production.
And did you sell Insane?
I did. So what happened was, I can't remember, it was early 2000s, 2003, I think. BBR Capital, which was owned by Brett Blundy, they were really in bras and things. They had sanity music. They definitely didn't have any fashion and never been in fashion. I got approached by them, and I think the offer was quite good. So I decided to sell. I do regret it enormously, but we sold anyway. And in that sale, I spent a few months just integrating it back into their head office, which was out in Western Sydney.
And was that when you then segued into cosmetics?
I was going to take a break, as famously everyone says. Well, I was going to take two. I had a
lot of conversations with you start with, I was going to take a break.
I know. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I know that now. At the time, I didn't think I was. I was going to take two. I had a new baby. James was born 2001, and he was 2. And I thought, right, that's great. I'm going to be the greatest dad you've ever met, and I'm going to spend like every day with him. That lasted about a month, and I was like, right, I've got to do something else.
This is the first of several glitches in this interview where the internet stopped working. There's got to be more. Keep an eye out for them.
Yeah, I was trying to take a break and be a great father and spend it every day with him. And I think children don't need every second with their father. They just need to go to different people. So, but we noticed in the due diligence with something that I never picked up on. In the Insane stores, we used to have a very small selection of a product called NYX, NYX from Los Angeles. It was cosmetics. It was eyeline, pencil, lip gloss mostly. It had about just a counter display on every store. What we noticed when we sold across, the accountant came to me from BR Capital and said, what are these products? I mean, they were quite a high percentage of the margin and sales. And I hadn't even picked up on it. And that was when I realized cosmetics might be something that could be of interest. I mean, I definitely knew every female wore cosmetics at some time. And it was a kind of product that had a bit of fascination to me too. And so I started looking into it, and then I developed Gloss from scratch. Gloss was completely, it was a living room project where I sat in my living room thinking, how am I going to do this cosmetic business?
Now, was that about the same time that Poppy King was doing her matte lipsticks and things, or has she been gone by then?
No, she actually was peaking around that time. And I think she only had a very tight lipstick range, and I loved it. I thought it was a great idea, and I liked the marketing. She had that kind of Wheels and Dole Baby, if anyone remembers Wheels and Dole Baby. She had that kind of, not goth, but it was Kat Von D's, if you like now. But it was really lovely, and I loved it. The quality, of course, was exceptional. She did an amazing quality. But I felt that the gap in the market for gloss was the budget range. I'd been importing NYX. They call it NYX in Australia, but it's actually pronounced NYX in Los Angeles, which is the goddess of love, of course. We've been importing it, and gloss started with NYX. I mean, we approached the owners and she was a lovely lady in Los Angeles. I sat with her, and we were bringing in, air freighting in, for the first 3 stores of gloss. I did it very much the same way as I did Insane. I started off buying locally or in America, air freighting it in, and then started developing my own product in China. And we also had 16 other local brands. I wanted to go boutique Australia, so it was Sugar Baby, Model Co, Bloom. I mean, a lot of these brands don't exist now, but some of them do. Chi Chi was a great one, and they still Melbourne company is still around.
Yeah, but glitched again. If you're watching for the production values, you may as well just quit now and go and watch something by Casey Neistat.
But basically all Australian brands, and we manufactured underneath it. So we had our house brand, if you like, the Gloss brand as the lower price point, and then the others above it. And we expanded from there, and we did a lot of the fashion accessories. So anything that was really in fashion and fashion accessories. So the store was a 50-50 split between 50% cosmetic, 50% accessories. And I felt that the fashion accessories always kept the store current, because you'd always make sure that those fashion accessories were sitting right in the moment. And cosmetics, of course, the colors change and the products change, but they do have a much longer shelf life than fashion accessories.
And did you sell gloss, or did gloss kind of run its course?
If I should have sold it. It's that famous thing where I probably hung on too long. I was never worried about, we had Sephora, of course, come in the market, which is a huge company. And I didn't worry about them because their price point was so high, and I felt it was a different customer base. we had 75 Gloss stores throughout Australia and Perth and Queensland and all through the Westfield shopping centres and AMP and Gandale. I never worried about it. But what I didn't see was what I call the cosmetic war between a lot of the pharmacy brands, Cosmetics Warehouse, Priceline, Price Attack, and then parallel importing a lot of Kmart bought product in. And basically the bottom end of the market within 6 months was attacked. I mean, it was ferocious. I mean, I saw 50% off sales in a lot of those big chains, and they have 400 or 500 stores, and I don't think cosmetics is their main business, so they didn't worry about it because Gloss being it's the main business. And I saw that erode overnight, and I thought, do we hang on for another 2 years and redevelop the business and put money into it? I actually decided to close it while it was profitable, which is insane, I know, but I calculated that we could afford to close it and keep the manufacturing, keep the wholesale.
Hold on, I lost you.
Yep, again. But it's okay, you're not missing anything because we go over it and I make sure that you get to hear everything he says.
It was time to shut the doors while you still had money to shut the doors with.
Yeah, I wanted to go out without a mess, if you like. And when you've got that many stores, there's an awful lot of leases to pay out. And so I just managed it. And actually, we closed it within 2 months. And it was I was very simple. It was amazingly easy to do when you've got money. And we closed it, and it's been closed now for 3 years. And, it was, I love the business. I don't think it has, even now, people are saying, why don't you reopen now? But I don't think budget cosmetics is actually where the market is now. I think the girls are more affluent. There's an online community of Instagram models and influencers that have their own makeup. I mean, there's the very famous ones that I don't want to promote, but there's also smaller ones that have jumped into TikTok in the last year. Item Beauty, which is owned by Ali Rai, and all these smaller brands that are popping up are actually dominating the market. And I don't even think Sephora are aware of it either.
This was the big one, the glitch to rule them all. We had to disconnect the call and reinitiate it. You can see me here desperately hoping he doesn't come back dressed in a different shirt or something.
And this is where you're going to have one of those conversations where you go, and I was going to take a break.
Yeah, I know you're waiting for it. I definitely.
Actually, before we go there, is there a lesson you sold Insane when you, not reluctantly, but it hurt to sell it? Everything was going well and it hurt to sell it. But is there a lesson there that maybe you need to leave yourself wanting more as an entrepreneur selling a business? Leave something in the business for someone else to play with?
I think it's always, I think what happened was I sold the fashion business really when it was quite small, 17 stores, but it had quite a big manufacturing private label business. When I sold it, so when I went to the Gloss, I always had this thing, well, I'm not going to sell it early. I sold too early with Insane. I should have gone to 50 stores. Actually, BBR Capital with Insane, they did roll out to 50 stores. I mean, they were doing 25 stores a year. Then that didn't work for them either. They for some reason they didn't manage it very well. And I noticed after 2 or 3 years they decided to shut it as well. Being a public company, it was shut pretty quickly too, and didn't really get noticed. So with Gloss, I probably thought in the back of my mind, I thought, no, I need to hang on. I need to get to 100 stores. Australia's always 100 stores. And I definitely did not see the fact that parallel imports would be such a major thing. I mean, it's always been big, but chains like Chemist Warehouse and Priceline, they can bring in and manufacture budget cosmetics, and they literally went to war. So they were at war with each other, and Gloss got caught in the middle. And being trapped in the middle of a war is never easy. So shutting it was the only option.
So Gordon Gekko famously said, never get emotional about stock. And is that what you did? You got emotional? It became an ego thing. You wanted to build it. I
think with Gloss, definitely, I actually thought, no, I can ride this wave out. I think Chemist Warehouse, all these companies will get bored of cosmetics. They'll realize how hard it is. It's not easy. But we were manufacturing, so the manufacturing arm and the private label arm is still going today. So what I did is close the retail and maintain the manufacturing private label. So that still is quite a sizable business and exports to 22 countries, and it's still going. but the retail in Australia, high rents, high wages, budget cosmetics just couldn't fit into that category anymore.
And did your private label manufacturing end up manufacturing for some of the people who pushed you out of the market at the retail?
No, no, I don't think I could do that to myself. I tried to go a little bit higher, so we were looking more at the sort of $30 to $60 retail cosmetic price points, and that's the better way to go with private label rather than budget.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of players in the market now, and I don't know if we caught this before on Zoom, but it's a different world now. To go back into budget cosmetics is almost impossible. You've got every Instagram influencer. Jeffree Star's got his own brand. There's TikTok stars now. Addison Rae's got one called Item Beauty. Item Beauty is selling so much on a TikTok account. I think cosmetics has been picked up as something that's quite easy to attach to a personality and sell. Whereas gloss was the personality,
yeah.
and that's just, the business model has completely changed. So I'm definitely not emotional about closing it. I was never worried about it. I mean, it's purely a numbers game. And I did have other businesses as well. So I've always had more than one business running at once. So I guess there's always that other focus too.
So with the Instagrammers and the TikTokers now, are they generally women that were running makeup tutorials and then started their own brands? Or are they models who are just wearing makeup?
No, you're 100% right. I mean, Jeffree Star was a makeup artist and has moved into his own product. They usually do collaborations with makeup brands, like Morphe did one, MAC do quite a few collaborations. And then what happens is a manufacturing company or a development company will approach that person and say, hey, do you want to partner up? I mean, Coty's probably one of the largest manufacturers in the world. I think on record, they paid the Kardashian over $800 million US to partner up. That's a different level when they're partnering up at that level. And it's all online. There's no stores. There's some distribution through Sephora. There's some distribution through Ultra and all these pharmacy groups in America. But really, the online has changed the whole business.
So back to you. So I know you kept the wholesale part of that business going for quite some time and only sold it recently, but you shut the retail business and then you utterly failed to take a break again because you started a bar.
Yeah.
You opened a bar.
Yeah, actually.
Which seems to me to be the ultimate poor investment decision. Everyone goes, don't open a bar.
Yeah.
They never last more than a year.
Yeah, well, it's a massive failure rate. You only have to, I think if you Google it, I think it's 90% on fail in the first year. I think I've always been someone who goes, well, I've got to challenge myself. And you look at someone like Merivale, which I think Justin Hams does just a phenomenal job. I mean, at a very, very high end scale, he purchases buildings, he renovates them. Every single concept seems to work. I don't think I've unless you can come across one, I don't think I've come across one that ever failed. And I've certainly enjoyed all these things. I was very curious about how that worked. And so the only way to satisfy that curiosity is to jump in there. And I literally spent 1.8 million and opened Assembly Bar, which is, Assembly was in Regent's Place in really a Chinatown end of Sydney. I wanted to focus on a particular demographic. I wanted to keep it very tight. And it was not immediately successful. People look at it now and they're like, wow, it's so successful. The first year was so hard. I've never come across a business that's so difficult. I've come out of advertising, so getting that marketing and advertising to work, it took 12 months to build up. And then after 12 months, of course, it gets easier. But you're right. I think that first 12 months, unless you've got deep pockets, I remember thinking, when is this ever going to end? When is this ever going to end? And then, of course, it just started to come to life in the second and third year. The third year, it really, really was quite good. And then I thought to myself, what do I do now? Where do I go with this? I mean, it's making money. It's got a great reputation, but I wanted to do something else. That's where Employees Only came in. I was looking for the next challenge. I wanted to go into, if you like, the big end of town, around Martin Place and a different demographic. And I wanted to go in a little bigger. I was very, very nervous to go into that part of town. So I wanted to bring in a big brand name.
When you first started talking to them, they were just one bar in New York, weren't they?
They were. So it was around 2014. Dusan Zarek, which is one of the founders of Employees Only, was doing a bit of a junket tour around Australia with an alcohol brand. He was an ambassador for his own alcohol brand, which I think he's now sold, Ford's Gin and a few others. He was doing a tour, and my bar manager for Assembly said, Igor Pashi, said to me, "You would like this guy." He didn't say what he did or anything. He just said, "I just know the two of you will get on well. You're passionate. This guy's really passionate." He'd met him before on a few occasions. We sat on a milk crate in Darlinghurst, had a coffee, and we sat for hours. I mean, Dusan and I sat for hours. Maybe it was the coffee helped, but we sat for hours, and we didn't talk about bars. We talked about life. And you know, if you've spoken to Dusan now on your previous podcast, I like what he said. I mean, I never managed to. I'm a real numbers guy, a business guy, and I'm all about systems. I'm all about marketing. He comes at it from. He came at it from such a different place. I'd never heard that before. I'd never seen that before. And I said to him on the milk crate, I said, "Can I bring Employees Only to Sydney?" And it was one very famous bar in New York. I think the number, 15 years it had been in the top 10 bars in the world. And he looked at me and he said, "I don't think so." And of course, when someone says no to me, I probably want to do it even more. And we had a lot of conversations about how to do it, and would it be a direct copy of it? Would it have the same drinks? We had those conversations. Then my son got sick, very sick, and I had to put life on hold. He was 14 and got very ill. And I put a whole year on hold, if not 2 years, to get him well. He was pulled out of school. He had multiple operations, and he's now very well. But I put everything on hold. I emailed Dusan in New York and said, "Look, I can't do anything. I'm really sorry, but let's just freeze the conversation." We kept in contact. I went to Los Angeles, and we kept in social contact. In that time, they had, as you mentioned, they opened Singapore, and I think they opened Los Angeles just before. So they kind of moved ahead with the idea of branching out Employees Only, and I came later. One of the questions people always ask me, why did you bring Employees Only to Sydney? What apart from talking to Dusan and believing in his story and believing in the product, it was a powerful brand. I mean, I'm a business person. I see a brand name and I'm like, wow, bring it to Sydney and everyone will love it. They'll all just queue for it. But Damian, I'm not sure if you remember that, a lot of American brands don't work in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, Starbucks is a famous.
Starbucks is famous.
Lack of success story.
In fact, they're still not in Australia, really. It's owned by, I think, 7-Eleven Group.
Yeah, I think there's 2 Starbucks.
I certainly don't want to compare Employees Only to fast food, but I looked at it and I think if you go back to, I said to Dusan, look, there's a massive failure rate. And I feel Australians, and I consider myself Australian, and Sydney people especially, you have to be humble. You can't go in as this big top brand from America and just want to dominate the market. So I put my advertising hat on. And if you look back at the very early advertising of Employees Only in Sydney, we took a totally different approach. We didn't go in there with the world #1 bar. I actually had, we used a lot of humility in the advertising and marketing, and I flipped it completely and turned it into, we used humor to advertise it. I had a guy in a spa bath, a famous video I shot of a guy in a spa bath introducing Employees Only in a full black suit with a cocktail. And we just tried to have fun with it and not take it too seriously. And it worked really, really well. I mean, it worked so well, that little twist to it. We shot a little scene of Reservoir Dogs, of all the bartenders walking slowly, the original Reservoir Dogs scene. And at the end of it, one of the guys just trips and falls over. And I just really wanted to bring that into it. And that's really, Dusan had to trust me on that. I mean, he's all about, the #1 cocktails and the best quality food and the best trained staff, which is what it is. And I said, I want to do a bit of Monty Python with this. And he's like, okay, I trust you. And I think that goes back to those conversations and the long lead up to opening because of the delay I had. we built up a little bit of friendship and a little bit of trust between us, which I hugely appreciate him trusting me with his brand. And of course, famously, I actually redesigned it. The employees only in Sydney does not look like any other employees only. This is New York is an Art Deco building, as New York has beautiful buildings. The interior is dark wood, it's all Art Deco. I didn't feel that would work in Sydney. A facsimile version would just not work. And I flipped it, and if the one in Sydney is completely different, but it's proven itself to work extremely well for the Sydney market. So there's another element of trust Dushan had in me. That's a huge element of trust to redesign his concept.
Yeah, well, Dushan said that he sort of pointed out that, because I was talking with him about how you export atmosphere and how you kind of keep the important bits consistent and let the other bits evolve. And he was talked about how different New York, Sydney, and Singapore are, but how he
very different.
keeps the essence of each bar by putting someone who's worked with him for a year into the bar, and they go in there for a year, and they then they kind of imbue the bar with the employee's only way of doing things. They train all the staff, and so they kind of pass the baton like a relay. They pass the baton of the right way of dealing with people and the right way of kind of creating the atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely. Look, it was rigorous. It was no accident what he did. I mean, Robert was with Dushan in New York for 10 years. Robert was head barman for 10 years in New York. Robert relocated to Australia for 12 months. So he was here, Robert was here for 3 months before we opened. Robert would train staff, even the vernacular, you know, like the terminology and the expressions. I mean, New York's very New York. We didn't want to be anything more than Employees Only Sydney. We didn't want to be a pretend New York, but we definitely wanted the feeling and the ethos. And I think Dushan definitely, he's so right in sending someone over and saying, look, they need to be there all the time. And Robert stayed for, I think, the whole 12 months. And then Dushan actually comes over for the opening. He spends a whole month in the bar. He shakes. He does all the press interviews. So in a way, I mean, I remember the media. One of the things I noticed was when I opened my own bar for Assembly, I had 2 press articles. I couldn't get anyone. I was ringing up media. I think, oh, I must be good at this. I had nothing. And then Dushan comes to Australia, and there were 90 articles. I mean, we couldn't keep up. I mean, the breakfast shows were calling. It's not the power of the brand. I just think it's the way Dushan is. He's authentic. That's his business, and he, as you know, through the podcast that you've done, he's passionate. He loves his staff. He loves his business.
So you talk a lot about Dushan having to trust you and your judgment in changing elements of the bar. But you're the guy who's putting the money in. How does it feel for you when this guy from overseas, who, is successful over there, but he's telling you what you need to do in the bar here and what's important to keep when you're making those changes? You know, you have to trust him a lot as well. How does that feel? And how do you know what you have to say yes to and what you have to overrule?
Well, it was also the first time I've ever done a joint venture. So I think I would never have been able to do it if I was younger. I'm in my 50s now. Dushan is definitely in his late 40s. I think we're mature and we've been through businesses, and we understand there's going to be friction. We understand there's going to be compromise, but we got through it. I'm not saying it was, you know, I want blue and he wants red. I mean, there's definitely some of that, but we got through it for the greater good. I mean, one of the things with Dushan is he will explain something to you from it's always from the customer point of view. It's how does the customer feel? How's the customer see it? It's not about us. It's just not about us. That is a constant reminder with him, and I think that is what gets you through it. But definitely being older, and definitely being more mature in business and mature in a person. Joint ventures are always difficult, but that's what gets you through it.
So that's the rule for a joint venture: focus on the customer, not on the parties in the venture.
Yeah, you just always go back to the customer and say, it doesn't matter what we like. What does the customer want? It doesn't matter if it's price point, flavors. I mean, it was quite a big investment. I think it was over 2.5 million Sydney. And this is a 200-person venue, so it's quite small. Definitely, like you say, with the money invested and the time invested, because it did take quite some time. We went into a heritage building in Martin Place. I dealt with the council. This is when lockout was in Sydney. It's been reversed now, but lockout was in. I actually forced my hand and got the venue extended to 3 a.m. I mean, employees only is a late night bar. Shutting at 12 just wasn't an option. We found a beautiful venue, but it didn't have that license. So that took 6 months. So there was a lot of work, and Shannon and I were, and Robert was heavily involved too. We were heavily involved in all those decisions and got through them.
I get the impression from talking to you that you don't really look at the business when you invest or when you start getting behind an idea. Offline, when we were talking, you talked about how you invested in a fashion designer who just recently who's not much more than a good Instagram following in a market stall, and yet you're pumping money into her to build her up, and that's barely a business. It's like a hobby. So what do you look at? What are you actually putting your money behind? What do you see that tells you that that one's going to make it and that one's not?
I look at talent. I mean, I look at competence, but I also look at what, I mean, for my own businesses, obviously, I'm hiring talent, I'm hiring competence, and then I'm really just guiding it along and keeping it going. I come from a marketing advertising background. I was a photojournalist when I was very young. When I was studying, I was doing photojournalism. I worked in the British media as a photojournalist when I was like really young and traveled around. I come from this very visual feeling background of advertising marketing. If I can feel someone's authentic, and when I met Jushan and I sat on a milk cart, I'm like, this guy's so authentic. It's like, you know, I really have put my marketing hat on and go, right, there's not much more you have to tell apart from that story of how he started. I mean, his story, I mean, you know, it is one of coming out of Serbia. He's moved into New York. I mean, I'm sure your podcast, he probably talks his way through it. You know, he went, I've never even worked in a bar. I've never worked in a restaurant. I've never had a hospitality job. In fact, I'm pretty much never worked in anything I've done. So I have to trust in the people that I'm working with, if I'm hiring, and really, you just get a feeling if they're really trustworthy and authentic. You mentioned the fashion designer. You know, I remember Sass and Bide. This is not what I invested in, but Sass and Bide were in a market stall in Bondi. This is way before online. This is 25 years ago. And I remember seeing them on this market stall, and I was quite young, and I was like, wow, these girls are going to go somewhere. And I was in advertising back then. So I think I've always had a feeling that I can see a product or see something and see where it's going to go. And I guess that's why I ended up in advertising for so long.
Now, let's talk about you for a bit. You're notoriously private.
Yeah, this is the first time I've ever been interviewed. I think I did something with the Financial Review, but I refused to do it in person, and they interviewed me over the phone. I've never read it, actually.
I've never read it.
No, I've never read it.
I read it. It was quite good. You came out well.
I'm so glad. I don't know. I grew up in the country. I'm really shy. Generally, I'm quite shy. I don't see myself as a front person. I mean, I've never worked behind a bar. Certainly for hospitality, I've never really been involved in it. I'm not a makeup artist. I am a business person, and I want to make money. There's no doubt about that. So, but I am an advertising person. So I have this curiosity about how people perceive product. I absolutely love it. Watching someone, and people will laugh. I used to watch some Parramatta store. Gloss had two stores in the Parramatta Westfields, one upstairs, one downstairs. Big stores. I'd sit on a Saturday on the front. There used to be a seat at the front of Gloss store in Parramatta, and I'd sit for 5 hours with a coffee and watch people pick up product, how they behave, how they interact. I love that communication, but I am sitting watching. And then what I do is fine tune the marketing and fine tune the way things work. But I've definitely always been a background person.
So what are you? Are you an entrepreneur? Are you an investor? Are you an angel?
I think all of them, because I think when you're in business, that's what you're doing. I think you're all of them. I mean, you have to be now. I mean, I love the internet. I think the internet's the best thing that's ever happened to the whole world. You may not think so, but and a lot of people. I think even though there's a lot of talk about toxic this and toxic that, it's a phenomenal. Look at us on Zoom. The communication is so instant now, and I as a marketing advertising person, it's amazing. I was dreaming of it in the early 90s. I was working actually in advertising in the 90s. I used to dream of a CRM system that you could just get people to sign up themselves that were in the category that you were selling to. So say you were selling soap. I want everyone that bought soap to sign up themselves, put their name and address and details, and I can communicate to them. And then Facebook came along. You know, you dream of that stuff as an advertising person. So those are the areas that I really enjoy, that level of communication with people.
I imagine not having the internet early on allowed you to hide behind the business a little bit, but what's encouraging you to come forward a bit now, to kind of appear in public?
I think being older, I'm definitely more comfortable with myself, and I think anyone, I think we all say the same thing. As you get older, you definitely mellow and you're more comfortable with yourself. But also I notice a big change, and I think the millennials are now the next gen, but below them, they've got a totally different approach. Is everything's out there. Their whole life is online. I mean, they don't worry about what people think of them. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about this toxic behavior, but I don't think it's as big as people talk about. I mean, I've got kids, but they're all older now, but they've survived it. And the communication is now so direct and so easy for them. And I almost felt left out. I mean, I almost felt like, well, if I don't jump in now, I'm just not going to be relevant at all. And I don't know whether I'd want to be on breakfast TV doing talks, but I think the business communication, I've invested in a small fashion company you mentioned, and they have an Instagram account. Well, you have to follow them and you have to see what they're doing, but the communication is very direct, and I think that's just a change in the way that everyone's thinking.
Do you like it?
I'm beginning to like it. I think all these things are good. I mean, I'm constantly looking at challenges. I mean, I took up motorbike racing recently and race around track. So I think I'm always looking for challenges. I think that's really important. I look at my own father. He's I think he's 80 now, but he's now one of the top tennis players in Queensland. He plays every day, and he's out there and he's fit, and he's been, he's taken that up at a later life, and now he's become very good. I think challenges are good. So if it's a matter of getting out there and communicating differently and being more open, I think that's probably where it's important now.
Cool. Listen, this internet's getting flaky again. Let's call it a day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks again. Thanks for calling in.
See ya.
Bye.
I lost you again. Anyway, you're listing off all the brands.
Yeah, sorry. It was probably a good time for it to cut off. I was just going through the whole list.
Come on, lights, let's change.